So this video covers Nikki and Linda in the field, and then the reunion of Nikki and Eddie. Now age 14, 7 years apart. So we see Nikki and Linda making off. I hasten to add, it's page 70 onwards. So we see Nikki and Linda making their way up the hill. Linda having some difficulty in high-heeled shoes. You didn't tell me it was going to be over a load of fields. Nikki says, I didn't tell you nothing. I didn't ask you to come. You followed me. And he walks away from her. And we still see this sort of awkward, but comedically awkward, nature of their relationship. The fact that she fancies him, he fancies her, and yet neither of, or he can't bring himself to let her in. Linda says, watches him walk away and says, Nikki, I'm stuck. Holding out her helpless arms, with foot stuck. Honest. And of course, she's playing because she's desperate to give him any excuse to hold her to going to come into contact with her. And so he goes back and timidly, because that's a key quotation here, timidly, this idea that ultimately it's because he's shy that he can't communicate with her, and timidly takes a wrist and ineffectually pulls. And she tries to give him the hint and says, Nikki, I think you might be more successful if you were to sort of put your arms around here. And she puts her hands on her waist and almost lapses into a dream and says, oh, Nikki, be gentle, be gentle. And he manages to pull her free and says, will you stop taking the piss out of me? She says, I'm not. And he points down in the direction they have come from. Of course, Linda isn't, because she loves him, if he can't see it, or because he's so shy. He says, look, you can see the estate from up here. She says, have we come all this way up here just to look at the bleeding estate? Nikki, we're 14. The sparse here, the joke clearly being that she expects that they ought to be doing more together than looking at estates. I'll leave that to your imagination. Again, though, a little bit of a joke. She beams at him, invitingly, presumably, and can't take it and looks the other way and says, look. What? And now we start to get some dramatic irony, because he says, there's that lad looking out the window. I see him sometimes when I'm up here. And Linda, presumably now deciding that offering herself to Nikki is not having the desired effect, decides to try and make him jealous, and says, oh, he's gorgeous, isn't he? What? He's lovely looking, isn't he? All right, you've told me once. Well, he is. And what do you care if I think another fella's gorgeous, eh? I don't, he lies. I give up with you, Nikki Johnson, I'm off. You get on my bleeding nerves. And she exits. So here then, the perils of love and relationships. We now then see poor Mickey in this little sort of soliloquy almost. But he calls after her and says, what, Linda, don't, Linda, I want to kiss you and put my arms around you and kiss you and even fornicate with you. I don't know how to tell you because I've got pimples and my feet are too big and my bum sticks out, and there, in that quotation, in that synthetic list there, are all the anxieties of teenagerdom written large. He becomes conscious of Edward approaching and affects nonchalance, coolness, affects not to care. And Mickey speaks. Now, this song here is a parallel to the one at the end of Act 1, where they both sing this kind of duet, even though they're divided in space. But once again, it serves with that to sort of symbolize their bond. And we have Nikki saying, if I was like him, I'd know all the right words. Edward, if I was like him, I'd know some real birds. And their bond here particularly symbolized by the fact that they complete each other's rhymes. Nikki says words, Edward says birds. And then in a moment, Nikki says hair, Edward says fair. And so it just emphasizes this bond that they have, and even after 7 years away, it's still there, subconsciously, even if they don't know it. So, Edward says, if I was like him, I'd know some real birds, apart from those in my dreams and in magazines. And Nicky says, just look at his hair. His hair's dark and wavy, mine's mousy to fair, mine's the colour of gravy. Each part of his face is in just the right place, and see the fact that they're now singing together. They've gone from completing these little lines to singing in unison. Again, symbolises their bond. But Edward then goes on and says he's laughing at me at my nose. He noticed I should wear a brace, that I've got halitosis. The rhyme continues. When nature picked on me, she chose to stick on me. Again, in unison sections. It's like they sing together. And it goes on, eyes that don't match and ears that stand out. She picked the wrong batch when she handed mine out, and then she attacked me with permanent acne. Now, the comedic tone of this song, and of course the sparse that it links to, is further emphasised here. Now, when you have rhyme like this section here, where the rhyme is not on the last syllable in the way that, for example, it is with is, that it is with face and place, it's what's known as a feminine rhyme because it's on the unstressed syllable. So you've got acme and acne is a feminine rhyme, and then further up you've also got notice and halitosis. They're feminine rhymes. They're often associated with comic songs, so it just further emphasises the comic tone of this section. Feminine rhymes there. So it goes on then. I wish I was a bit like, wish I could score a hit like, and be just a little bit like that guy. I wish I could be like, just a little less like me, like the sort of guy I see, like that guy. It's ironic that they envy each other because, of course, in a sense, as twins, they are in fact so alike. And now the dialogue begins. Edward says hi, and Mickey says hi, is a Siggy. Now again, there's a direct parallel here because their first meeting when they were 7 years old begins is a sweet. You see it paralleled, it's a new beginning for them, but their maturity is reflected by the fact it's not a sweet anymore, but a Siggy. And Edward says, oh, I don't smoke actually, but I can go and get you some. And so once again, we see Edward, his kind, obliging nature, the fact that he is accustomed to having plenty of everything, that he can afford to be generous. Again, it clearly operates directly in parallel, and once again it reflects the class distinction between the two of them. Mickey, I think, saying he's a Siggy is trying to be tough, as he was at age 7, and I suppose in a sense it's also perhaps worth noting that the working class places this higher premium on this idea of masculine toughness as a survival strategy. This idea that strong men survive. Mickey replies, are you soft? And he suddenly realizes that it is in fact Edward, a blood brother. He says, Mickey, well, shag the vicar. And a bit more comedy there. Mickey laughs. What's wrong? You know, it sounds dead funny swearing in that posh voice. What posh voice? That one. Well, where do you live? The estate. Look. He points. It's worth noting there, actually, that quotation, swearing in that posh voice, is quite interesting because it reminds us, doesn't it, that Edward will always not quite belong in the middle class because there's something in his birth that places him where he is. He never quite fits in, so that's quite a useful quotation for Edward. So we continue. Well, where do you live? The estate. Look, and he points. Edward says, my God, I only live. I know. And here, then, it's very important, the significance of fate. The fact that they could have moved anywhere in the country, and yet fate has brought them to live so close together. Once again, it's worth reminding ourselves that they can't escape their fate. They can't escape the consequences of their actions, or in this case, their parents can't. But it's also worth noting, I suppose, that these two boys who are innocent in all this, they can't escape the consequences of their parents' actions either. So it just links into this idea that everybody is trapped. We've talked before about this idea of the cycle of deprivation, that from generation to generation nobody can escape. But here they're both the prisoners of society. Neither of them can escape. So Edward then goes on and fatefully asks, because of course we'll see in the future that he's interested in Linda, and so he fatefully asks, that girl I saw you with, was that Linda? You remember Linda? Wow, was that Linda? And is she your girlfriend? Yeah, she's one of them. Again, some dramatic irony, some comedy. Mickey feeling compelled to play the tough guy, and yet he can't keep it up for very long, and we know it's an illusion anyway, but he's trying. So, um, Edward says, one of them, have you got a girlfriend? Me? Me? No. Haven't you? Look, you seem to have a lot of them. Perhaps you'd share one with me. Um, Again, you could play that for naivety, but it's definitely sparse. Um, the idea that they might share a girlfriend. And Mickey comes clean and says, share one? Eddie, I haven't even got one girlfriend. But Linda, you said, and so we see. I suppose it isn't interesting actually, and there is a serious point then now to make about Edward's naivety. Um, the fact that he believed Mickey, and the fact that he asked to share a girl, it's a reminder that he has not been forced to grow up in the same way that Mickey has. So Mickey goes on and says, I know, but she's not. I mean, she would be my girlfriend. She even says she loves me all over the place, but it's just like they're difficult. What? Like knowing what to say. But you must. I know that. But every time I see her, I promise myself I'll ask her, but the words just disappear. But you mustn't let them. What do I say, though? Nicky, it's easy. I've read about it. Look, the next time you see Linda, you stare straight into her eyes and you say, Linda, I love you. I want you. The very core of my being is longing for you. My loins are burning for you. Let me lay my weary head between your warm breasts. And then, Mickey, her eyes will be half closed, and her voice may appear somewhat husky as she pleads with you. Be gentle with me. Be gentle. It would work, you know. Listen, we can see how it's done. Look, Isolde for 1 week only. Nymphomaniac nights and Swedish au pairs. Whoa! I had to go home and get some money. Now, pause. It's there. Again, there's a kind of naivety in Edward here that actually, in this regard, parallels Mickey in that sense that they're probably not so dissimilar. The fact that actually neither of them really have any idea, and this romantic idea that Edward has, presumably out of reading some kind of trashy romantic novel, is just as unrealistic as Mickey in his complete ignorance. So, in that sense, they're both lacking in this. Now, the films then, an nymphomaniac, we said earlier, was a sex addict. An au pair is usually a young girl, somebody who will, either for very low pay or from a sort of voluntary work experience, will come to a foreign country and live in the house to look after the children. So that's what we see here. So it's this pornographic film they're going to see at the cinema. Now, we talked earlier about the fact that the cinema is associated with escapism. I think that continues here. In this particular case, this idea of escapism and fantasy is projected onto the idea of sexual escapism and fantasy. They're going to the cinema to experience a pornographic film in a similar sort of way that when they were children, they went to see cowboys and Indians because it's the kind of fantasy life that they would like to be leading. They would like to be, presumably, having lots of sex with lots of women. Just as when they were younger, they wanted to be cowboys. It's that sort of fantasy idea. So we go on then. As the boys are going, we see Mrs. Lyons appear. She has seen Edward and Mickey, and she stares up at them. Making up her mind, she quickly goes and fetches a coat, then follows the two boys. This then is significant because we have a sense of distrust now. We talked about the difficulty of the relationship between Mrs. Lyons and Edward. The fact that she follows them specifically symbolizes that lack of trust very, very clearly. The narrator enters, and of course we know all about the atmosphere when the narrator enters, the fate, the kind of looming presence, the foreboding atmosphere, everything like that. With music, Edward says, I've got plenty, I'll lend. This is significant because throughout the play there are several situations where we see Edward giving things to Mickey. Sweets earlier on, the offer of a cigarette back there, he gives him a toy gun at the end of Act 1. Economic power is something that Edward, just like Mrs. Lyons, and therefore all the middle class people, have throughout this play. And it's something that here he's using it benevolently, unlike Mrs. Johnston. And yet, even here it's a reminder of that power that wealth gives to people. But Mickey doesn't need it because at this point now, we see where Mrs. Johnson is actually doing better. And so he says, no, it's all right, my mum will give it me. And he says, come on then, before my ma sees me. He's offered being my ma. That's significant because there's a reference there with offer being this metaphor to Mrs. Lyons and mental instability, mental illness, which is going to grow later in the play. So that's a quote worth noting, offer her being, and we'll see it more later. The boys exit, followed by Mrs. Lyons. The narrator sings, did you really feel that you'd become secure and that the past was tightly locked away? Did you really feel that you would never be found? Did you forget you'd got some debts to pay? Did you forget about the reckoning day? Of course, the key thing there, the motif of debt, this reminder of debts, repayments, that was established earlier in the play. So that quotation concludes with those. And of course, the reckoning day is a sort of euphemism or a synonym for the day of judgment. The idea that in the end, everybody must pay the price for their sins. And then we return once again to this chorus, or to this refrain line, yes, the devil, he's still got your number. He's moved in down the street from you. Notice that how the kind of proximity of him is growing, along with, presumably, therefore, the sense of urgency. And it says, someone said he wants to speak to you. Someone said they'd seen him leaning on your door. And the narrator exits.